Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Carledge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. We will start today's episode where I'm thrilled to welcome back to the show for part 2 of my conversation, the awesome Mari Valgma. And if you haven't listened to the first part of our conversation, you can find it as the previous episode on whatever app you're listening to the show on. In that episode, we explored Mari's journey in getting started with positive reinforcement training, what led her to developing movement puzzles, which we're going to unpack more in this episode today. It's definitely worth a listen. However, if you haven't listened to it yet, no worries. You are, of course, welcome to start here with part 2, where you're still going to gain plenty of insights to help you grow your skills, knowledge, and confidence in your training. So let's dive straight in. Mari, thanks so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us again at Animal Training Academy. It's so wonderful to have you here for part 2. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to be here and talk more about movement puzzles.
Yeah, we're going to go deep on movement puzzles today. We covered them a little bit in part 1, but maybe we can just give the listeners a little bit of a recap about what movement puzzles are, why you came up with them, and a couple of benefits, and then we'll dive in.
Okay, so movement puzzles are at their core pattern movement exercises where the dog moves between one bowl to another. So going from one bowl to the other bowl and then back to the first bowl. And gradually we add different exercises for the dog to do between the two bowls. And in movement puzzles, the exercises that we add between the bowls are generally exercises that are targeting coordination, body awareness, proprioception skills for our dogs, so that they would learn how to control their movements, control their body while actually in motion, and also develop coordination while moving. And the dog does the exercises independently, so we are not giving them handler cues because in most situations, our cues actually can be distracting for the dog. So here we want to split it up and make sure that the dog is can focus on developing their own coordination and feeling how their movement essentially feels like to them without getting distracted by handler cues or thinking about what the exercise criteria might be. And the reason why I started with movement puzzles was basically when I saw that my dog, who had been doing quite stationary and foundation fitness exercises for most of his life, but he was struggling in certain situations where he had to run and coordinate his movements or balance in trickier situations. So I was trying to figure out how can I help him develop these skills separately from the sports exercises. Because in sports exercises, I would want my dog to focus on understanding the criteria and doing the exercise basically correctly based on the sports exercise criteria. So I wanted to make sure that my dog would know how to actually use his body for these exercises before we actually started doing them. And that's how movement puzzles started. The very first movement puzzle exercises were some very basic setups. For example, the dog moving around the cone and there being poles placed on the ground behind the cone so that the dog would focus on the paw placement while in motion during a turn. But gradually, these exercises have grown a lot bigger, so we can actually do a sequence of different exercises between two bowls, and the dog knows basically what we do is that we link each prop that we use, because we do use quite a lot of props to help dogs develop coordination and balance skills. So the dog understands what each prop means or what behavior is linked to it. Is it like, I should move underneath this prop, I should move around this prop, I should move over this prop, for example. So they see one prop, they do the exercise, instantly they see the next prop, they do the exercise, because it becomes quite an automatic reaction for them at this stage. So we can build longer sequences of these exercises, but the basic foundation is still the dog moving from one bowl to another and then returning back to the first bowl and repeating that pattern.
And you mentioned fitness in there.
Yes.
But we talked about this in part one. But before we get going, kind of paint the outcome for the listener of the show of engaging in movement puzzles. So we obviously get a dog who's moving through all of his obstacles, but who does this dog become? Like what do they build? Like confidence, resilience? Like what are some of the main benefits you're seeing?
They build confidence in using their own bodies in all kinds of situations. And generally, I don't want to say that we are going to build like scary setups for the dog, but the setups that the movement puzzles or advanced movement puzzles often become are something that the dogs probably naturally wouldn't choose if they first saw the setup. So, for example, we have a setup of a noisy curtain. So that's basically things that touch the dog's body and make noise. It was inspired by search and rescue training. With my own dog, where dogs have to work in rubble searches. They have to be able to move through stuff that makes noise, touches their bodies. And I wanted to make sure that my dog is comfortable with it before he entered the rubble area. And now it has become a confidence boosting exercise for very many dogs. But it's not something that many dogs would choose naturally, that you set up a curtain of stuff that makes noise and the dogs are just like, no, I'm not going to do that. But we build the setup so gradually and so step by step that the dogs are constantly thinking, yes, I'm in, I want to do this, this is fun. And before you notice, you've managed to do the whole noisy curtain thing and your dog thinks that it's super fun and the coolest exercise ever. So basically, we are building the dog's trust in their own bodies and their ability, them knowing that whatever setup they may face, they're like, yes, I can totally do this. I'm happy with it. I'm confident. It's fine. I don't mind things touching my body. I don't mind things making noise around me. I can just do the exercise.
I just had a thought as you were saying that I don't mind things touching my body, like that would bleed into, I would guess, and you tell me, things like cooperative care handling, because suddenly now the dog's comfortable with things touching their hind legs and their feet and various parts of their body.
And also dogs will feel a lot more comfortable in their surroundings. For example, in the living room where there may be tight areas, for example, between the coffee table and the sofa. And if the dog happens to be cautious of tight areas and things going against their body, then this kind of exercises will make the dog feel a lot more at ease in these situations and also expand their world. essentially, when they discover that, oh, actually, I'm perfectly fine doing these exercises. And part of or not just exercises, I'm perfectly fine in these situations in general, because these skills generalize pretty well. And essentially, while I don't really talk that much about movement puzzles as a fitness training tool, we are more focused on movement puzzles as a confidence boosting tool, because essentially what we are helping dogs and their humans to achieve is dogs feeling confident and happy in their bodies and happy navigating the world, sport situations, whatever they may face. But one of the reasons why they work and help the dogs feel more confident is that they build these fitness skills, coordination, body awareness. So, for example, the same curtain of things that touches the dog's body, then this is super valuable, like touch sensory feedback for the dog of how big their body is, actually, where their back is. They may not get this information from other exercises. For example, if we do paw target exercises, then they understand where their paws are, but not necessarily where their back is. So we can use this kind of setups to help to improve body awareness and thus also confidence. And the dogs just knowing how big their bodies are.
So would you say building that proprioception?
Yes. The sixth sense. I think it's called another sense.
No, that's when little kids see ghosts, Mari. That's what the sixth sense is. I don't know if you've seen that movie. Hey, when I'm hearing you say curtain of things, what I'm imagining is a PVC structure with some chains and some kitchen utensils or some random things hanging down that the dog has to push through. They feel different. They sound different. But for those, tell me if I'm imagining something completely different than what you set up, and also paint a picture for the audience in terms of what you mean when you say curtain of things.
Oh, it's basically, it is whatever you imagine it to be, as long as it's safe for the dog and the dog wouldn't get tangled in the stuff. So we don't really use like anything that has strings or like things that get tangled around the head or paws or tail. My curtain of things is like industrial thread spools hanging on threads. Some people use pool noodles and mixed with plastic bottles, for example, and things like that. There are also people who have used like plastic Easter egg like things. So they are like on a thread and in a like kind of a chain of them. So these things to put together. Obviously, we don't start with noisy things if the dog happens to be noise sensitive. So with these dogs, we would start with something that didn't make any sound, just like touching the body. And for them, we would add the noisy parts very gradually and not that close to the body first. So it is adjustable to the dog as well. But basically, the curtain of stuff is like, as the description says, curtain of stuff.
And what are you using as your structure to hang things?
Mine are agility jumps. So the curtain is basically hanging on a pole and I use jump wings, but most people create some PVC tube structure, or for example, you can put chairs to hold it up.
Yeah, makes sense.
But also, just a word of caution that I do recommend people not to start with this exercise.
Yeah, that also makes sense.
Because it sounds fun and it's super beneficial, and people often want to start with it, but it's an advanced exercise. So it does require quite a few prerequisite skills first. So don't start with it, please.
Yeah, cool. Well, I hope to, maybe not right now, but soon talk about the difference between beginner skills and more advanced skills. But let's go right back. You mentioned the 2-bowl game. Can you talk about, just revisit that, talk about what it is, where it came from, and why that's important to movement puzzles?
Mm-hmm. So I learned it from Elaine Lawler at Fancy Dog Sports Academy, and I know that there are quite a few classes in there that teach the 2-bowl game. But it's essentially, it's first taught with the bowls really close to you or even in front of you, 2 bowls basically next to each other. And we use a marker word to tell the dog that in the long run, it becomes like, well done, you will get a reward. But at this stage, you're basically just saying your marker word and deliver a treat in one bowl. Then you say your marker word and deliver the treat in the other bowl, just for the dog to see that, oh, there's a pattern. We are moving from one bowl to another. And then you gradually start increasing the distance between them. And then you start adding exercises one by one, so that the dog basically does the exercise and gets a reinforcement in one bowl, then returns to the exercise and gets reward or reinforcement in the other bowl. And one of the very important elements of this exercise is that we want to build that independent return to the exercise, because how quickly the dog wants to get back to the exercise tells a lot about their comfort with the exercise. So we want to pay attention to that. And if we see any hesitation from the dog's part, or the dog thinking that, yeah, this was fun, but I don't feel like doing it anymore, or whatever they may try to communicate to us with hesitation, then we must listen to it and pay attention to it and respect the dogs basically saying no. I really love Dr. Susan Friedman's, I think that she uses it in a slightly different context, that respect the no, shape the yes. So that's what we want to do with movement puzzles as well. We always want to respect the no, and very often it starts with just like the dog slightly hesitating before returning to the exercise or before going towards the other bowl.
Yes, and if you haven't listened to episode 250 of our show, you, the fantastic listener, go back and listen to Dr. Susan Friedman talk about that concept. A couple of questions before we go any deeper, just for the listeners, a little bit of context. What's the time frame here? How long have you been focused specifically on movement puzzles?
I started doing them with my own dogs during COVID. So that was in 2020. That's when I started experimenting with them. I would say that I was doing them for about a year, and then took a short break, because initially it was, in my mind, it was a fitness training tool, and I wasn't fully happy with it. I was like, yeah, but there are other fitness training tools out there. So it's like something is missing. But then I started getting messages from people who had been doing my first movement puzzles course, and they started saying that, hey, I started doing movement puzzles, and it's the only thing that I changed in my dog's training routine. And I started noticing this, and they reduction in reactivity, dogs becoming less sensitive to noises, dogs feeling more relaxed at home, all these behavioral changes. And I was like, that's super interesting. How can it be that we are doing these movement puzzles, pattern movement exercises, focusing on coordination and balance skills, and people are seeing benefits in all these different areas. And that's when I actually get interested again in movement puzzles, in the sense that then it started clicking for me that, yes, there is something more to it. And it's worth investigating more and see where can we take this concept and how can we help our dogs.
Amazing. And just before we go on, just quickly clarify, I'm calling them movement puzzles, but we're kind of interchanging between movement puzzles and movement patterns. They're the same thing, just for the listener of the show.
They are the same thing, yeah. The official name is movement puzzles, but it is a pattern exercise, basically. So that's where the pattern comes from.
Yeah, and for listeners of the show, as I start to imagine what this could look like for them and either their dogs or their clients, I'm assuming that in terms of a puzzle, a activity, a program that you can teach to your clients, the simplicity of it is appealing in terms of go from this bowl to this bowl. I mean, that's just
Yes.
a task that you can give a client that is super low hanging fruit in terms of it's hard to mess that up. It's pretty easy. And then is that kind of like an appeal that you've found that people have liked about movement puzzles?
Yes, and also they like that the dog is doing it themselves. Some people would like there to be always handler cues, but but yeah, the movement puzzles are not for handler cues. Basically, we are trying to remove ourselves, the handlers, as much as possible. We are there to observe the dog, how they are interacting with the setup, and if the setup needs to be adjusted based on what the dog's choices and movement communicates. So we are there as observers. But also people find the fact that the dog, it basically looks like DIY obstacle courses, which people find instantly attractive. It's like people like to think that it's like doing agility in your backyard. Well, it's not exactly agility, but people do find it super appealing. And also, for example, people find it similar to parkour, but just with the exception that the dog is doing the exercises independently.
So the cue is like my human's here, but they're not doing anything, and that's my cue to do things.
Yeah, basically. But because also like they get the setup instantly that it's bowls. Usually there are cones because we use cones, buckets or similar as like guides through the course so that the dogs learn to go around the cones. And basically, I'm not sure like how familiar you are with agility, but basically you have like optimal approach lines to different obstacles. So in movement puzzles, we try to use cones to help dogs approach trickier setups or like exercises where it's important that, for example, that they turn to the exercise a few meters earlier, not like the last minute. So we use cones, and the contextual cues are pretty strong for the dog. It's puzzle time.
Has anyone ever done it with a cat?
Yes, we have cats as well who have done it. I haven't seen advanced videos from them, but I know that people have definitely started very successfully with cats and horses as well. Guinea pigs are also doing them. So
all right, cat, horse, and guinea pig trainers out there. There's your challenge. Some advanced movement puzzles. So I'm imagining a situation with my cat Marty, who I am very intermittent with my training because the listeners of the show you won't know this, but Marty and I, this is the fourth time we've attempted to record this episode because somebody in my house is always sick. Two young kids under the age of 6. And being winter here in New Zealand, that also means, Marty, that my training is intermittent. So I haven't done a training session with my. I'm like working on this thing with my cat, and it's like real consistent for a while. But then, like, it's been about 3 weeks now since I did a session because I just haven't been able to fit that in to my day, which means that, and that's how my training's looked for years. And so I get my cat into my office, and we do like a trick behavior for a trick title. And I use a lot of lures and prompts because it's like just want to do something quick while I've got an opportunity. So what I train my cat to do is sit down and look at me, right? And I posted this in our Facebook community just to kind of see what ideas people would come up with. Like, hey, I've got this learner who is cued by me to do nothing. Well, not nothing. Sit and look at me. Is it helpful for that situation? Because people were like suggesting like 101 things to do with a box and these kind of things that have had lots of interesting discussions online about the pros and cons of them. And I'm just that's example came to my mind as you were talking. Oh, this could be helpful for Tilo to kind of learn to independently do things from me. But then I'm also like, there's still props and stuff in the environment. So just got curious.
And
about
also, like with these setups, we want to be very careful with how we set it up because we want to make sure that the learner is correct and they get the reward, and also that they wouldn't link like 100 different behaviors with the same scenario, because otherwise it will be very difficult for them to do the exercise reliably. And also, there's a difference if the dog, so for example, if the dog is trying to figure out the exercise criteria, let's say that you have like 3 boxes, one after another, and the dog is supposed to like step from one box to another, like on top of the boxes, basically. So platforms. So they are basically like a human would step from one rock to another, basically in a sequence. And if your dog is like trying to figure out the criteria, then yes, they are working on their coordination at the same time, like trying to figure out how to use their body, like, or what is required, how am I supposed to move my body. But also there's coordination linked to the fact where the learner knows exactly what the criteria is, and then tries to, or their nervous system tries to find out the most efficient way to do the exercise. So for example, instead of trying to figure out, oh, what should I do with these 3 boxes, the learner knows that I should step from one box to another, and then the repetitions are there for the nervous system to figure out like what's the most efficient and the best way to do it. How will I feel most comfortable? How can I balance? Should I start with this foot or the other foot? And you soon see that your dog starts developing different preferences, that while first their choices may look a little bit like random, soon you start seeing that they start doing, like, getting more settled into what they've discovered about the exercise.
And for those listeners, Mari it's evening in Estonia, and Mari was just slowly getting darker and darker as the recording progressed. Thanks for turning on the light. My daughter, my 5-year-old Mari, says that she thinks she is an amazing scooter rider, and she wants to be a scooter instructor when she grows up. And she teaches me and my wife like we're really stupid. And she teaches us how to ride scooters, like how to put our leg up properly and stuff. But I remember when she first got the scooter, we went out and just brought it to her and took her home, surprised her. It was like, hey, look, here's a scooter, let's go scootering. And she'd get on this board and she would like, it's got 2 wheels at the front, 1 at the back. So depending on where she puts her foot pressure, the board will turn left or right.
Yeah.
And she'd get on and she'll just crash into the grass on the side. And she'd get back up and she'd crash and she'd crash and she'd crash. And over an hour, I just saw her crashing less and less and going straighter and straighter, because the environment, through no thought process, I imagine she was about 3 at the time, was just.
It is like it's the nervous system works.
The nervous
on it.
system, yeah. So the environment's telling her nervous system,
yeah,
put foot here with this amount of pressure. So that kind of came to mind, and that process happening. It was a very cool thing to watch. I talk about it often, but it comes to mind like that's kind of what's happening with the dogs, is like they're not necessarily, and I'm not saying they're not, because maybe they are, but like it's just, there's just this feedback to their muscles and their foot and their pressure, like in terms of how to move through these puzzles.
And I think that what I've encountered a lot is that people say that they want to see their dog thinking, and they don't see, like, they are afraid that in movement puzzles they lose that. And they want to see more of that, like trial and error, or the dog trying to figure out the exercise. But actually, these exercises are designed to be like so clear to the dog that the dog doesn't have to think like, oh, what's the criteria? What am I supposed to do here? It's supposed to be so clear for the dog that they know the criteria, and that their nervous system can then start using that environmental feedback to adjust the body and to find the best solution for the dog. And it doesn't mean that we do like hundreds of repetitions of the same thing. It's usually like we do very quick training sessions and not focusing on doing like super long sessions of the same thing. But we also, in movement puzzles, we kind of want to adjust the exercise and change the setup very frequently to challenge the nervous system, so that it's like after every few repetitions, when you see that your dog starts to like settle, like your kid was starting to like get the grip of the balance, you start adding like smaller challenges that, for example, you move the props a little bit so that it's like slightly different, and that they have to adjust again, so that they basically, what we are doing is that we are not focusing on the learner thinking. I don't really want to say that we are not focusing on that, because like we do want our learners to be like thinkers. But the goal is that the exercise criteria should be very clear for the learner, so that they can then focus on the nervous system taking over and adjusting the movements and applying that feedback that they get from the environment in the most efficient way. Because that's what our dogs also need to do when doing sports. Their bodies need to be like very adjustable, and make changes very quickly based on the feedback that they get from the environment.
This is how is logically actually helping those people achieve their goal when they want to see their dogs thinking more. So I'll throw some logic at you, and you can see where it lands. But building confidence, and confidence coming from dogs' bodies becoming more skilled and fluent at navigating obstacles, having things touch them, etc., that is going to then flow into sessions where the dogs have to think more about how to access the reinforcement, because the piece of the puzzle about can I do this has been removed, and it's kind of happening automatically. So it does achieve that goal. It's just some like foundations and building blocks to just build general skills before.
Yes. And also like I also think that the fact that we can't see our learners thinking doesn't mean that they are not thinking. Because for me it's I often think about, like when I think about this, that we want to see our dogs thinking. The fact is that, for example, in high school I was very good at maths. When I had a maths test, I was just writing. You wouldn't see me thinking like doing any of these like funny movements, like chewing my pencil or looking into the ceiling. I was just writing very quickly, while some people next to me, they were struggling. They were like scratching through their numbers and then looking into the ceiling and then thinking. And it doesn't mean that I wasn't thinking when I was doing the maths test. It was just that for me it was so logical and it was so clear that I could just like do it, very quickly process the information and apply it. And I'm slightly worried that very often when we say that we want to see our dogs thinking, if we are accidentally kind of like take away their logical thinking in that sense, if that makes sense, in the sense that we want them to be like not processing information quickly, but we want to see them processing information, which may be the slower path, if it makes sense what I just like said.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. The word fluency comes to mind. Is that like you had a level of fluency there that others didn't?
Yes, you could say that, and I think that we can also say that about dogs. And what I find super interesting is that when we teach movement puzzles to our dogs, we are essentially teaching them concepts. We are teaching them the concept of going between things that are like close together. So basically forming a narrow gap, going underneath things, going over things. And it always amazes me that when we've taught the skills this way, basically like concept of going between things, going over things, when I start teaching a new exercise to my dog that requires these same skills, like going underneath something or going between things, it takes me usually like less than a minute for my dog to get it, to understand it fluently, and to actually apply it even at the distance from me and doing it independently. So I'm just thinking that basically the way that we teach movement puzzles is like teaching our dogs the logic of doing the exercises, and then they can just apply it to any situation that looks familiar to them from these concepts.
So For the person listening, how does a person get started? Grab two bowls. Sounds like that would be the logical step. But can you offer any more in terms of what equipment you might suggest people get? How do they manufacture the first steps? And give some examples of a puzzle for a beginner dog. And then just to help us contrast that, give us some examples of what a puzzle might look like for an advanced dog or cat or hamster or horse.
So with a two-bowl game, you basically started with the bowls quite close together. It depends very much on the dog how far apart you put them. So let's say that you have them like on your sides, essentially, or your width part. You have treats in both hands. So this is important. You use both hands for a reward delivery. And you start with your dog just like being in front of you, you saying your marker word that you would later intend to use to mean a treat will be in the bowl, essentially. You say your marker word. Be mindful of your own mechanics, that your hands are still when you're saying your marker word. And then after you've set your marker word, a slight pause, and then you deliver a treat in one bowl. And then as soon as your dog finishes eating that treat and starts lifting their head, because that's the first movement that the dog actually has to do in order to get to the other bowl, you already say your marker word and place the treat in the other bowl. And this first step, it's I always like to say that don't think that your dog has to go to the other bowl on their own. They don't. The first step is basically you creating a pattern so that you say the marker word, you deliver a treat as you promised in one of the bowls. Your dog eats the treat, lifts the head, and you say your marker word and treat in the other bowl, essentially. And very quickly, dogs generally catch on. They understand, oh, this human is like moving in a pattern. I get treat from one bowl and then the treat appears in the other bowl. So usually you can start delaying your marker word very quickly because you see your dog looking towards the other bowl or even leaning towards the other bowl already. So you can gradually start delaying your marker word to basically mark the first steps towards the other bowl. And when that happens, you can start moving the bowls slightly further apart. And at this stage, I wouldn't move them further like a comfortable arm's reach because you need to be comfortable with your own mechanics as well. And usually the first exercise that I teach is moving around a cone or a bucket or a flower pot or something similar. And you place it right in front of you so that your dog can't move between you and the flower pot. You want the flower pot or the cone be between you and your dog, definitely. So you place it really close to you and you basically do the same pattern just with the prop there. And then you gradually start either moving the prop slightly further away from you or keep the prop in its place and then start moving you and the bowls back a bit to increase distance, because that actually keeping the prop in place works better for many dogs. So that's how you get started.
That's a pattern that I think we can all understand, and many of us listening, including myself, have taught go around the cone. Yeah. Trying to think back to how I taught it, but it wasn't using bowls like that, and I can see where that would have added clarity, I think, to my teaching process for my dog. Can you also now contrast that for the listener in terms of an advanced puzzle that your dogs are doing?
Yes, so one of the last puzzle that I came up with for our students was what I call the blocked exit puzzle, which means that there were like two cardboard boxes and we created a curtain between the boxes so that the dog, it doesn't look like there's a way through, essentially, for the dog. But we teach it gradually. And also, there are ways to like create clarity with the setup to make sure that the dog knows that in this setup, I can push through versus in some other situations where it's maybe not the smartest thing to like push through. So you create the setup to make sure that your dog knows that in this setting, it's fine to push through and things will start moving away once you put pressure on it. But essentially, the dogs are like pushing through, and there are like multiple curtains in a row so that they go through one curtain and it still looks a little bit blocked, and then they push through another one. So we are big fans of curtains, basically.
I just had this vision of to draw some parallels for the listeners if it's helpful. But when we go to the swimming pool and there's a giant inflatable obstacle courses, which are like, and your child who's never done even like a basic floaty, like jumps on it, gets past the first obstacle, and then there's like the next one immediately. And they're doing that with no skills of like stabilizing themselves on an inflatable surface. Anyway, I hope that was valuable for anyone listening.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that with all these setups, like there are prerequisite skills that we teach first to the dog. So they never start with this like only getting rewarded when they push through. Basically, there's no such situation because the dog would get a reward even if they moved around the setup. Like if the dog tells me that no, I'm not going to push through this stuff that you just built me, they still get the reward. So that the dogs are not losing out on anything. But because we've built these skills so gradually, then dogs actually, even very cautious and sensitive ones, start wanting to push through these things. Basically, they're like, yes, I can do this. This is fun.
Awesome. And during this whole time, the human, their role is just silent observers and letting their dogs figure out until they get to the behavior that they mark, which is arriving at the bowl.
Yes, but basically it's also that especially when we talk about the advanced puzzles, then chances are that the dog knows the criteria really well. When they see a setup, they know what it's about. And you probably have had quite a bit of experience of doing these basically dog's choice-based puzzles and doing them in a way that your dog is successful. So all of us have these moments where our dogs do other behaviors. They start going around the exercise. They hesitate near the bowl, saying that, yeah, I'm not going through this thing. Because like I know this, I have firsthand experience because I create these exercises. I often have this that I set up an exercise to try it out and my dogs tell me that, yeah, no, let's try something else. So your goal as a handler is to observe your dog's reaction to the setup. Usually, like at this stage, when you are at advanced team, then it is your dog just hesitating slightly or maybe changing their speed while doing the exercise. So your goal is to change the setup or adjust the setup to make sure that your dog is 100% comfortable. And if it happens that you accidentally set it up a little bit too difficult and your dog tells you that, hey, this is too hard, you make it easier and then build it back up in more gradual steps, always making sure that your dog is happy doing the exercise.
And so the things you mentioned before we pushed record today that you wanted to talk about was the other reinforcement, and you touched on it there, but not maybe in this frame, the other aversives that can be present in the yes. training situations. And also you talked about wanting to mention errorless learning in this, and also reinforcing feeding all of the things, even if yes. we don't get the behaviors we want. Can you unpack some of these important principles for our listeners?
So in movement puzzles, basically what we do is that we reward every single repetition, and by repetition I mean even when the dog hesitates, for example, looks at the exercise and says that I'm not going to go through that, they get a reward. So basically the learners know that they can say no, and they still get the treat that we are using during the training session. And very often it makes people quite worried because in most training scenarios, you are taught that basically you reinforce the behaviors that you want to see or the correct behaviors, and you don't reinforce the behaviors that are basically incorrect. In movement puzzles, I don't like to use this words correct or incorrect, because only the learner knows what they can do with the setup, and they are the ones who have to move through the setup. You don't have to do it, so only the learner can know how they feel about the setup. So people get worried that, but then if I reward every repetition, then won't my dog be confused? And the key thing here is that I already touched it a little bit before, but we want to make sure that when we first start teaching movement puzzles, that the setups and how we train these exercises is super clear for the learner, so that the risk of the dog choosing to do something else is very low. So they do the correct behaviors, or so-called correct behaviors, the behaviors that we see as the correct ones in this setting, basically. So you build this habit, or basically a cue picture for the dog, that if you see these props, then this is the behavior that we are looking for. So the key thing is that when teaching movement puzzles, you should really focus on basically errorless learning to make sure that the setups are very clear and that you can reinforce basically everything that your dog does, because everything is the behavior that you're looking for. And then once you get to more advanced puzzles or situations where your dog hesitates, for example, or goes around the props or things like that, you basically know that your dog already has an understanding of what these exercises are about. And usually, when we talk about more advanced movement puzzles teams, then when their dogs choose to do something else during the exercise, then it is to communicate a problem. It's not that the dog doesn't understand the exercise. They understand it well, and they are just trying to say that maybe the floor is slippery. Maybe the setup is like, maybe there's something moving that they find a little bit odd. Maybe they are not comfortable with it. Maybe they are getting tired. That's a big one. That fatigue also causes dogs to say, yeah, I don't want to do it. When we remove these reasons for the dog to say no, even when we rewarded all these other behaviors like hesitating and not going through the exercise or moving around the exercise, once we remove the actual cause for the problem, they start doing the exercise perfectly again. So the learning is like so multi-layered that our dogs we can't really think about dogs or animals and thinking that we just need to give them a food reward and that will reinforce the behavior, because that may not be the case, especially, for example, in movement puzzles, when we think about the setups that they are intend to help dogs in areas where they naturally may not be super confident in, let's say, tight spaces, that the dog isn't super comfortable in tight areas. And movement puzzles, or like movement puzzle setups, there are specific setups that can help with that. So it's working in an area where the dog isn't naturally super confident in. Then it means that there is a danger that there are aversives in that setup for the dog. It can be that maybe the area is too tight for the dog to start with. It can be a slippery floor. Slippery floors are a big, or slipping during the training session is a big aversive for the dog. So even if they get a reward for the correct behavior and they may understand what the correct behavior was, they may not want to repeat it because it's like, well, it was physically really uncomfortable. I don't want to do it again, like despite getting a reward. So there are like different elements at play, different reinforcements. So many dogs find moving reinforcing, or stepping onto things reinforcing. So in movement puzzles, you have like different reinforcements happening depending on the individual dog, but you can also have different aversives happening. And you can't just think that when I gave my dog a cookie for something, then I rewarded the behavior, because it may be that at the same time you had aversives at play that were more significant than that treat. I hope that I answered your question, or maybe you have some questions now.
I do, but we've only got so long, so let's park my questions, and there's always opportunities for you to listen to learn more. I'm going to show you where you can go to do that shortly, but I thought a nice way to wrap up would be to talk about some case studies. So we've talked about in this episode and in the first part of our conversation some of the benefits of doing movement puzzles. Am I correct? Because it's been a few weeks since we recorded part one, but dogs with that exhibit behaviors that we might label as reactive, it's been quite beneficial for. And can you give us a case study of a dog that you've seen go through the program and where it's helped with a challenge like that?
So like my own dog, but
Nice.
we actually now have a reactivity special course as well, because last winter, so my own dog is dog reactive in situations where other dogs appear, like in an otherwise empty area, they suddenly appear, for example, in the forest. And my dog, also because he has a health condition that causes pain, then he finds like he doesn't like other dogs. And especially when they appear out of nowhere, he's not a fan. So he's quite reactive he was quite reactive in these situations. And I started basically talking with our behaviors that, like the training sessions, the reactivity training sessions, maybe we can start trying like doing movement puzzles during reactivity training sessions. So we have these setups with trigger dogs or helper dogs, and me and my dog would do a very simple movement puzzle during that training session, because also, like in reactivity training, very often you don't want them to, like your dog to do like obedience exercises or things like that, because there it may be that, especially with dogs who want to work really hard, that you're overrunning a bit, like their need to process the information or the surroundings. But with movement puzzles, because there are no handler cues and the dog is actually like free to make their choices regarding the exercise, then it's a pretty like soft exercise to try. And we started seeing like very fast improvements in my own dog, his reactivity, and also during our forest walks, something that I hadn't been able to target with other reactivity training protocols, because it's just like something that like it's very difficult to imitate in training situations, that the dogs surprise you as well when they appear. And with movement puzzles, the behavior is set up exercises like very mindfully adjusting the direction of the puzzles, also the trigger dogs, and creating different situations during the setups. And she actually ran the first movement puzzles reactivity special course in March, or started in March, and she's seeing very quick and incredible results with her students as well, who are using movement puzzles or these pattern exercises with helper dogs, essentially. So it's pretty awesome. So it's not necessarily movement puzzles themselves helping with reactivity, but using movement puzzles for reactivity training and trigger setups, basically, which is awesome.
It is, and if you, the listener of the show, think it's awesome too, and you are wanting to go and learn more and look at this reactivity course or some of the other great offerings that you have online, because you are in Estonia and most of us aren't,
Yes.
and you want to learn from Mari, or maybe you're in Estonia, you can go visit Mari. Where can people go online to find you, to find movement puzzles, and to learn more?
Our website is themovingcanine.com. You can also find me on Instagram, the.moving.canine, or words spelled out. And also on Facebook, Mari Valgma, The Moving Canine. So you can find us there. Our reactivity course, if this is something that you're specifically interested in, then this is a brand new thing. So we haven't really put it out so widely yet, but it's like both me and the behaviorist who is teaching this class, we are super excited that you can actually use this concept that I first developed for coordination and body awareness, and now they are using to help dogs feel more comfortable near other dogs or when they are seeing other dogs, which is a really huge win, to be honest. However, it shouldn't be that surprising because also in humans, it's known that body awareness and balance exercises can help with the behavior challenges. I'm missing the human word for this now, but but like, for example, with like overcoming traumatic events and things like that.
Resilience?
Maybe, but it's like basically like when people are anxiety and past traumatic events. So it is helpful in human therapy. Therapy is the word that I was looking for.
That's where I was landing as well. We will link to all of this in the show notes. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us today, Marty. Sadly, that does bring us to one more question for this episode, because I love asking people this question, and I've never asked an engineer from Estonia before. So, and someone who's focused on movement puzzles. So I'm really curious, as you sit there in Estonia and you run your business and you engage online, like what's your vision for the future in our evidence-based, values-driven practice? What do you want to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years in our industry?
Well, I would very selfishly say that I would want to see more recognition of how our dogs' physical well-being, and here I don't mean just like physical health or like our dogs like seeing a vet regularly and having like a good blood test results, but I mean like good coordination, good balance, good body awareness, because over the years I've seen how much it affects the dog's behavior. It's also, when I started looking into this, it's also linked to the nervous system, because like for training coordination and balance, you are training the nervous system, which is the same one that works with behavior as well. You also engage the same areas in the brain. For example, coordination is processed in the same brain areas as the ability to make logical connections. So I would like to see more of that applied in all of dog training, or it becoming part of basically foundation training, not just for sport dogs, because for sport dogs it is becoming quite common that they are doing different body awareness and coordination exercises, but for all dogs. And for example, in human children, proprioception is often called a need, that the learner needs proprioceptive feedback from the environment. And for example, kids who are very boisterous with their movements or very forceful with the movements and run into things, they are, as I understand it, they are often trying to communicate their need for proprioceptive input. And they really benefit from doing these exercises that focus on applying their strength and coordinating their movements and balancing. And if we think about dogs, then we have so many different games for our kids to learn these skills, and we have very few for our dogs. And I think that it should become more as a norm when raising dogs as family members. And I think that you can prevent a lot of problems by paying attention to this area as well. That there are coordination, balance, and proprioception needs. And it's the same for humans as well. So
Makes me think about, let's say we're considering a dog who has behaviors like your dog, Murray, that we label as reactive. And then we're thinking about the most positive, least intrusive intervention to help us with that challenge. and we look at a tool like Susan Freeman's hierarchy of behavior change interventions according to the most positive, least intrusive, effective alternative. And then the first turn-off on that is meeting needs and wellness. And so often I think maybe we enter the hierarchy higher up, thinking about positive reinforcement and what behaviors we're going to train. But if we can add the consideration of proprioception and confidence that comes from being able to move your body effectively in a variety of different contexts, and then potentially that will serve as a least intrusive option for many individuals. That's exciting.
Yes, it is. Plus, it makes like all the next steps a lot easier. Once your dog like feels super comfortable in their body, it's like teaching other new skills will be so much easier, because otherwise, your dog has to learn how to use his body anyway. But then if you don't pay attention to it separately, then your dog will have to basically like multitask when you are trying to teach something. They are like trying to understand the criteria, trying to understand how to use their body at the same time, and it slows down the learning. But I can't remember like what we were talking about in the beginning of this podcast, but you mentioned something like similar, that when your dog is already like knows how to use his body, then it's like you can quickly teach the other criteria and the thinking parts of like different exercises, because your dog doesn't have to focus anymore on like, how am I going to solve this physically? Because they're like, I have the solution. Now I just have to understand what I should be doing here. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like to give an example, I was running into some issues on my website, and so I've been working with a developer for 6-7 months to try to figure out what's going on. We finally figured out it's due to one specific page and some of the features being used on that page, and what they require from the server. And if a visitor visits that page, is overwhelming the server. So we've identified that now, but that has been like if you think about it, like your browser, like that has been an open tab in my mind for like 6 months, you know, and every time I'm like making a business decision, like I've got 6 or 7, probably more than like 60 or 70 open tabs in my mind, you know, and my goal is always to shut down some tabs. Like people when I share my browser screen and Zooms, people are like, oh my God, I can't believe how many tabs you have open on your browser. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like my mind. So it's kind of like closing some tabs down in your dog's mind to free up some space and to create less overwhelm. People get overwhelmed by having too many tabs open.
Yeah, and also, for example, the clearest example of this has been some of our students who do nose work with their dogs, and they say that after they started doing movement puzzles, their dogs become a lot more efficient in their searches. And I suspect that partly this is because the dog is then can focus more on the search itself. Not like, how am I going to navigate this area? Because like nosework dogs often work in very tricky areas. And the dogs then, once they've done movement puzzles, they can focus on the search and following order without like thinking that, this part of the area looks dodgy. I'm not sure I can go in there or if I can fit there. But after having done movement puzzles, they're like, yeah, I can totally do this. I'll go there to find the doors.
That makes a lot of sense. It has been so much fun, Marty. From myself and on behalf of everyone listening, we really appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartledge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.